Hello, welcome to yet another session in Literature and English. In our session today, we are going to be looking at two major recommended poems in the non-African category. And the first is Crossing the Bar by Alfred Lord Tennyson, and the second will be The Pulley by George Herbert. Now let's begin with the first, Crossing the Bar. When we talk about Crossing the Bar by Alfred Lord Tennyson, I want to give you a very brief background about this poem. A very quick flash into the background of this poem reveals that Alfred Lord Tennyson is a man that was always very optimistic about death. The majority of his literary works has always been predicting his incumbent death, of which we had also seen instances where he announced his imminent death in this poem titled Crossing the Bar. And then we had also seen that in his autobiography or will, he had always instructed that this poem should be published in every of his collections. If you also have a quick or great information about this poet, you will agree and understand clearly that Alfred Lord Tennyson died at age 86, possibly just 2 years after the publication of this poem. Now let us consider the title of this poem, Crossing the Bar. Now, the bar as used in that poem is a metaphorical representation of the movement of life, from life, I beg your pardon, to the life beyond. Now, do not forget that the bar can also be metaphorically talking about the mood of sun, which so many people who live in riverine areas will always use to demarcate the flowing river from coming to take over their homes. In order to avoid the overflow of the river into their homes, so many people who reside in riverine areas will always create moles of sands in the shore or the bank in order to ensure that this river does not overflow and then take over their homes. So that when these people want to go for fishing or any form of river expedition, they will have to cross over this bar. That was the setting in the environment of the poem. But in the real essence, Alfred Lord Tennyson was using this bar in a metaphorical sense. Do not forget that metaphor has to do with comparison of two opposite things directly without the use of like or as, where one thing will be representing another. So the sandbars as depicted in the physical and mundane world is exactly in the metaphorical sense as used by A.L. Tennyson to mean the crossing over from life to death. Now let us examine this poem line by line. The first quatrain of the poem reads, Sunset, an evening star, and one clear call for me, and may there be no morning of the bar when I put out to sea. The next, but such a tide as moving seems asleep, too full for sound and foam, when that which drew from out the boundless deep turns against home. Twilight an evening bell, and after that the dark, and may there be no sadness of farewell when I am back. For though from out are born of time and place, the flood may bear me far, I hope to see my pilot face to face when I have crossed the bar. That is A.L. Tennyson's Crossing the Bar. You will agree with me clearly that the tone of the poet speaker is clearly talking about an imminent death. He is very certain that he is about to die. Therefore, he is leaving a warning to those that he is about to leave behind, not to cry, not to worry, not to mourn for him when he finally dies, when he finally crosses the bar. Therefore, meaning that he is moving from the world of physical realm to a world of spiritual activities. Now, there are so many metaphors in this poem that talks about an imminent death. The first is captured in the first stanza, sunset, an evening star. Now, from the terms sunset and evening star, whenever the sun sets in every human society, it is a signal that the day is about to be over. Of course, many human activities are heading towards its decline for the day. And this is the term A.L. Tennyson uses to denote the imminent death of which he is about to undergo. And then the second line says, and one clear call for me. Now, that line simply explains that he is not in the position to decide whether he takes over the duty of moving away from the mundane world or not. He sees death as a clarion call of which he must obey. And then he went further to say that, and may there be no mourning of the bar when I put out to sea. That statement simply is a warning to the survivors of which he will eventually leave behind, not to cry, not to weep, not to mourn for him when he finally put out to the sea. Of course, we can see that A.L. Tennyson uses a typical sea voyage activity to explain the movement of his death away from the world. He typically uses these two sets of activities to metaphorically compare the life of which he is about to end. Now, don't forget that when I talked to you about the background of the poem, I had talked about seafaring activities as well as those living in riverine areas. Since perhaps this was the preoccupation of the poet speaker, he decides to use this familiar background to explain the imminent death of which he is about to undergo. In the second stanza, he said, but such a tide as moving seems asleep, too full of sound and foam, when that which drew from out the boundless deep turns again home. Now, in this stanza, the poet speaker is seriously hoping that as he is undergoing this transition, he prays and hopes clearly that the sun and as well as the sea will be very quiet. It is very characteristic of some riverine communities that the sea is always very violent during the night time. But this poet speaker is hoping, he is wishing that as he will embark on this life's journey, a life moving from the mundane world to that of the supernatural, he prays and hopes clearly that the world that he is moving into will usher him a peaceful transition. Now, in the third stanza, he says, twilight and evening bell. And that is yet again another metaphor talking about the imminent death. Twilight means the light that is about to show, of which the day is about to end. Evening bell, of course, explains the same thing. And after that, the dark. And may there be no sadness of farewell when I am back. Again, the second time, A.L. Tennyson warns his intending survivors not to mourn for him when he finally dies. Now, in the third and the last stanza, he said, for though from out or born of time and place, the flood may bear me far, I hope to see my pilot face to face when I have crossed the bar. Now you could see that he clearly believes that when he dies from this world, he is going to have an interaction with his God, which he called his pilot. He believes clearly that life on earth is all about accountability. He clearly convinces himself, as well as those he will be eventually leaving behind, to know clearly that when one leaves the physical world, he may most likely be accountable to his Creator. Now, he said in that line that he hopes to see his pilot. He hopes to see him and show accountability for what he is about to do. Let's quickly try to look at some literary and figure of speech that we may try to say. And then we say sunset and evening star and one clear call for me. One clear call. Now, if you look at clearly in the first line of the second quatrain, he says, but such a tide as moving seems asleep. You will agree with me that that line is a strong expression of personification, because you could see that the tide there, which is a non-human, is being personified to operate or do things human beings should have done, which is sleeping. And then we could see clearly some uses of metaphor clearly. In fact, the poem is painted from the beginning till the end with elements of metaphor. Twilight and evening bell, sunset, and one clear call for me. All these are metaphors that talk about the imminent death of the poet speaker, of which he was strongly predicting. Now let us consider the themes in the poem. The first theme in the poem is the theme of death. Now, when we talk about the theme of death as being the strongest subject matter in this poem, you will also agree that the poet speaker was talking about death right from the first line till the end. In the first lines of the poem, he was predicting his death. He even talked about what should happen when he eventually passes on to glory. And that was, he warned those he will leave behind not to mourn for him. He uses several terms. Now, do not forget that Tennyson did not clearly talk about death in the real word or sense of the word, but he used metaphors. He talked about darkness. He talked about the evening bird. He talked about one clear call for him. He also mentioned twilight. He talked about several metaphorical instances that explains the imminent death of the poet speaker. Clearly, death is painted in the whole of this poem. He talked about his movement, his transition from the world of physicality to that of spirituality. He believes clearly, you will agree, that Tennyson believes in transition of life. For Tennyson, life does not end when one dies. Therefore, this poet speaker believes that there is another world waiting for every human being after the real world. He believes clearly that when one dies from this world, there is another realm, another mundane world, perhaps spiritual world, that is awaiting man for his accountability in his previous life. The second theme is the theme of hope. The poet speaker, even though he is sure that he will die, he is very, very hopeful. The staunch issues of hope is demonstrated strongly in the last stanza of the poem when he said, "For though from out our bourne of time and place the flood may bear me far," he stated clearly that he hopes to see his pilot face to face when he crosses the bar. Now, do not forget that even in the second stanza, he had also wished and hoped that the sea which he is going to use as the medium of voyage will be peaceful enough for him to go through. He also strongly hopes, as he clearly stated in the third line of the last quatrain, that he wants to see and hopes to see his pilot face to face. So the poet speaker, inasmuch as he is very sure that he will die, he is very hopeful that the life he is going to experience after the mundane life is going to be a better one. Now, let's look at this question as regards the poem. The poet speaker in Tennyson's Crossing the Bar is A. Optimistic about death, B. Pessimistic about death, C. Discouraged about death, and D. Happy about life. You will agree that the strongest option in those sets is option A, which is that the poet speaker is very optimistic about death. When we talk about optimism, we are referring to the state of which somebody is very certain that something will occur. Therefore, the poet speaker is very sure that he is going to die. He clearly stated that in every line of his poem that his death is not only imminent but is inadvertent, is unavoidable. You can never avoid it. So the poet speaker is very optimistic about death. Pessimism is the opposite, of which may not actually be the answer. Also, looking at some literary devices as used in that poem, I had already mentioned metaphorical expressions as painted all over that poem. Another thing I want you to know about this poem is the rhyme scheme. Now let's together look at the rhyme scheme of every stanza of this poem. Now, in the first stanza, we saw sunset and evening star. Star, that is A. The last word in the second line is me. It doesn't rhyme with star, so that will be B. The third one is bar. You will agree that star and bar rhymes. Then that is A, B, and A. Then we have C and me. So the rhyme scheme in the first line or first stanza of that poem is A, B, A, B. Let's see if that is the case in the second stanza. The last word in the first line of the second stanza is asleep. Asleep. That is A. The second one is foam. That is B. The third is deep, of which is it rhymes clearly with asleep. Deep, asleep. Then the last one is home, which rhymes with foam and home. So the rhyme scheme there again is A, B, A, B. Let's see how it happens in the third stanza. The last word in the first line of the third stanza is barrel. Barrel. The last word in the second line is dark. The third is farewell. It rhymes with barrel. So that is A, B, and A. Then the last word is embark, which rhymes with dark. Then we have A, B, A, B. Let's see the application in the last stanza. We have place, which is A. Far, B. Face rhymes with place, and then bar, which rhymes with far. So the rhyme scheme in Alfred Lord Tennyson's poem titled Crossing the Bar has A, B, A, B in every stanza of the poem. That is a strong indication and all the things that you have to understand as regards this poem. Now let's move into the second poem in this segment, and that is The Pulley by George Herbert. Now, when we talk about this poem, The Pulley, let's first of all understand the meaning of the title of the poem as used by the poet speaker. Now, a very quick dictionary meaning of this item, the pulley, reveals that the pulley is a mechanical implement that is used to lift some heavy objects in a factory. Now, if you have ever visited a factory, you will see that there are several heavy objects which may not easily be moved around by human beings. Now, if of which there will be, it will take a lot of time. I can refer you to the closest brewery in your neighborhood. You will see that when the finished products are packed up in a pile, there is a machine that will easily lift it and then move it from one location to the other, or perhaps can even lift it from the production room to where it can be loaded and then ready for delivery. That mechanical item is called the pulley. Now, from the metaphorical use of these concepts, the pulley and the object, you will agree with me that the pulley is superior to the object of which it is conveying. And that is the message the poet is conveying in this poem. This poem, or the poet, pictures and presents a strong relationship between God, the maker of mankind, and man, of which is creature. Now, in these two relationships, or these two people, you will agree that the relationship is somewhat superordinate, subordinate relationship, where God, as represented in the item pulley, is superior to man, which is his creation. That is why the poet speaker decided to title this poem The Pulley, which shows the relationship between a superior force and an inferior force. Now let's look at the poem The Pulley. When God at first made man, having a glass of blessings standing by, let us, said he, pour on him all we can. Let the world's riches which dispersed lie contract into a span. So strength first made a way, then beauty flowed, then wisdom, honor, pleasure. When almost all was out, God made a say, perceiving that alone of all his treasure rests in the bottom lay. For if I should, said he, bestow this jewel also on my creature, he would adore my gift instead of me, and rest in nature, not the God of nature. so both should losers be. Yet let him keep the rest, but keep them with ripening restlessness. Let him be rich and weary, that at least, if goodness lead him not, yet weariness may toss him to my breast. That is the pulley. Now, if you had followed the way I read that poem, you will agree clearly that that poem is clearly explaining the source or the reason of which man is naturally restless. The poet George Herbert traces or uses a biblical concept of origin or creation of man to explain the reason of which man is somewhat restless. Now, we all are humans. You must have been asking yourself, why is man so insatiable? If he doesn't have money, he will need it. When he has money, he will need something else. Man, from the day he was born till the day he dies, is naturally insatiable and restless. George Herbert in this poem clearly explains the reason of which that is the case. Now look at the first stanza. When God at first made man, having a glass of blessing standing by, let us, said he, pour on him all we can. Let the world's riches, which dispersed lie, contract into a span. Now, that stanza explains that during the creation of God, of man by God, he clearly said that man is the only creature that is born out of the image of God. So God, as well as his Son and the Holy Spirit, decided to bless man with all rounds of riches. That is why he said, let us, said he. That us there simply explains that God is in a Trinity, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. He said, let us, said he. That means three in one God. Explain, let us pour on this our creature the riches and everything in it. Look at the second stanza. And what did they give to man first? Strength first made a way, then beauty flowed, then wisdom, honor, pleasure. Now God created man and gave him strength. He gave him beauty, he gave him wisdom, he gave him honor, he gave him pleasure, and a lot more of other world's riches. Now in the third line of that second stanza, the poet speaker says, when almost all was out, God made a stay. That means he stopped. Immediately when everything in the glass of blessing as he was pouring on man was coming out one after the other, and when almost all of the blessings was out of the glass, man actually was enjoying it. So God stopped there, and perceiving that alone of all his treasure rests in the bottom layer. Can you picture that? Let's say strength made its way, pleasure followed, then we saw honor and all other riches, and then at the bottom of the glass was rest. And immediately God stopped pouring the blessing. He said, perceiving that alone of all his treasure, rest was in the bottom of that glass of blessing. Now let's see what happens. Now God said to himself, for if I should, said he, bestow this jewel also on my creature, God believed that man will adore the gifts instead of him, and he will always adore nature instead of the God of nature. Now, God is the one that created man. He knows us right from when we were conceived before our birth. He said to himself, I have given man pleasure, I have given him honor, I have given him beauty, I have given him riches. Let me not give him this very important jewel, which is rest. Because God saw that if he gives man peace of mind and rest, he will do what? He will adore the gift and ignore the giver. He will neglect the natural God and even embrace the outburst of nature. This is what God did during the creation, according to George Herbert. Now, in this stanza, he clearly stated that if God actually had given man everything he needed, then definitely he will always be adoring those things instead of the giver. Now look at the last stanza of this poem. God said to himself, let him do what? Keep the rest. God decided to withhold rest from man, but keep man with ripening restlessness. That means continuous restlessness. So when God had forecasted, had predicted his creature man, that if he gives him this very important jewel, which is rest, he will adore the gifts and neglect the giver. He will worship nature and abandon the God of nature. So God decided to withhold rest as stated. He said, yet let him keep the rest, but keep them, that is man, and his descendants with ripening restlessness. Let him be rich and weary. That means man will be very rich, but he will be restless. Then at least if goodness lead him not, yet weariness may toss him to my breast. So man actually is restless. This poem explains the reason of which man is restless. That means God purposely, according to George Herbert, withdrew this jewel, which is peace of mind, from man, so that man in all of his endeavors will be intelligent, he will be beautiful, he will be handsome, he will be rich, he will be powerful, he will be strong, he will have all forms of treasure and all world's riches, but he will never have peace and rest. So that if he is not reasonable enough to go to God, then restlessness will do what? Will toss him back to God. Perhaps, according to George Herbert, God did not want man to languish in death. He did not want to destroy man. That is why he purposely withheld this very important jewel from man, so that man will always have a reason to come back to him. We are all the creature of God. God knows us right from the moment of our conception, even before our delivery. He knows what we can do and what we may not have been able to do. So God knew that when man has everything in life, he will neglect him clearly. So he decided to keep the most important of the gifts, and that is rest, so that he will be rich, but he will be restless. He will be handsome, and he will be restless. He will always be very treasurable and valued, but he will always be restless. So that restlessness will always form the basis of which man will always run back to his creator. You will agree that George Herbert believed that God had valued the salvation of man. God did not want man to die, because if he had given him everything including rest, then he would have run after all those things, forgetting his creator, of which will eventually lead him to death. So this poem put forward by George Herbert, The Pulley, explains the relationship of God, the pulley, as metaphorically represented in the title, and man, his creature, of which he had used to explain the superiority of God over man, which is subordinate to him. Now let us look at the themes in the poem. The first theme is the superiority of God. Now, as denoted in the title of the poem, The Pulley, you will agree clearly that the poet speaker maintains that man is highly inferior and subordinate to God, his creator. God is superior because he was the one that made man handsome. He made man rich. He gave man every form of treasure. But with all this, the superiority of God, as denoted in this poem, clearly explains that man is the creation of God, and there is no how the creation of a person can be superior to the creator. So God created man in his image and purposely withheld the most important jewel of the gift, leaving him with the rest, so that this restlessness will bring him back to God. God designed man to operate like that. The second theme is the reason for man's restlessness. Perhaps so many people must have been pursuing happiness elsewhere. Some may think that happiness lies in riches. Some may think it lies in fame. Some people may define happiness in terms of education or wealth. Some may see it in successes in careers or businesses. But clearly, if you have an interview with these people, you will understand that they have some elements or atom of restlessness. But anybody who is in God, according to the poet speaker, will always be fulfilled and happy even when there is none other thing. So this poem clearly explains the source of man's restlessness. People have money, yet they are restless. People are famous and rich, yet they are still restless. Some are fulfilled academically, yet they still remain restless. So this poem clearly explains that the restlessness of man is not in the making of man. Rather, it was predestined by God so that man will be in that form, therefore spinning him back to his creator. Now the third poem theme is man must accept his limitations. Now clearly we know that we are human beings. We must always pursue our lives, our goals, our aspirations. But clearly this poem, according to George Herbert, has drawn the line of which man cannot go beyond. This poem clearly explains that man cannot buy rest with money. Man cannot buy rest with beauty. Man cannot buy rest with honor, with power, with fame, with intelligence, with academic or even business successes or accomplishments. That the only way man can be happy is always going back to God, his creator. So that in the midst of finding happiness, it can never be found anywhere other than coming back to God, who is the creator of man. So man must learn to accept that happiness cannot be achieved anywhere, but it can only be taken by having faith and peace in God, his creator. Now the fourth and the last theme is God's love for man is limitless. Now you may actually think that God is somewhat wicked, in quote per se, by making man restless. But this poem, according to the poet speaker, explains that God's withhold of rest away from man was an expression of his love for him. That is because he always wanted man to come back and worship and, if possible, reverence him at all times. Now, if God had given man everything, including rest, then he wouldn't have been lost. Of course, the poet speaker clearly stated that man will, of course, according to God, who said, will worship these gifts and neglect the giver. Clearly, God loved man. He values the soul of man. He wants man to be saved. That is why he withheld this very important gift, so that man will clearly always run back to him. So God's love for man is boundless, it's limitless. If God never loved man, if God never valued the soul of man, he would have given him everything, including rest, so that he dies and be condemned in the end. But God actually forecasted, he foresaw that man will always not value this gift. He withheld it consciously so that man will always run back to him and be saved in the end. Now let's try to consider some literary devices as used in this poem, The Pulley by George Herbert. Now let's see how we can go line by line and pick point each of these literary devices as used. When God had first made man, having a glass of blessing standing by. Now you will agree with me that the second line in the first stanza of that poem is personification. Now what is personified there is glass of blessing. Now it's as if glass of blessing is a human being which is performing the function or the feature of standing. Having a glass of blessing standing by. That is personification. Now we can see clearly that if we move into the first line or the second or even the third in the second stanza, we say, so strength first made a way. That's personification. Strength is personified now to operate as human beings that is moving. Then beauty flowed. Then wisdom, honor, pleasure. All these are clearly usages of personification. Now let's look at this. He said, for if I should, said he, bestow this jewel also on my creature, he would adore my gift instead of me and rest in nature, not the God of nature. So both should losers be. Now let him keep the rest, but keep them with ripening restlessness. There is the usage of porn in that line. the first two lines of the last stanza. He said, let him keep the rest. The first keep there is to withhold something. But the second one is, but keep them. That means let them remain. So the keep there is played on. That is pawn. The first keep there stands for something else, which is to withhold something. And then the second keep there, but keep them means to allow something to flow. That is the usage of pawn. In ripening restlessness, let him be rich and weary, that at least if goodness lead him not, yet weariness may toss. That is a strong example of personification. Weariness there is personified to perform the action of tossing, that is to smash him to my breast. Breast there is the usage of synodake. Synodake is that figure of speech in which a part of a whole is used to represent the whole, or the whole is used to represent the part. An example will be, there will be a head count in a country by next year. The head there is representing the counting of human beings, even though a part of the whole is used. Or if you say something like, let all hands be on deck, hand there simply represents human beings. Or many eyes gazed at him during the performance. The eyes there simply means that human beings were gazing at the performer, but eyes are used as a part of the whole to represent the whole, which is humans. So in that last line, breast there is used as a part to talk about God, of which is the whole. Then tossing, of which is something like it is personification. Now let's see how we can be able to identify the rhyme schemes. Okay, let's take this question and then we will be able to identify that. Now, George Herbert's in The Pulley explores option A, the supremacy of God, the selfishness of man, the ineffectiveness of death, and the nature of mankind. The correct answer is coded in option A, which is the supremacy of God, of which that is a clear-cut answer. God has been explored clearly about his supremacy over man, of which is even coded in the title. Now, have you noticed anything about the titling, or perhaps the scheme, the rhyme scheme? Now, let's look at it now. The first word, or the first line, has the last word man, that is A. Then we have by, which is B. Then we have can, which rhymes with man, and that's A. And then we have lie, by, lie, so that's B. And then we have span, which rhymes with can and man. So the first stanza there has the rhyme scheme A, B, A, B, A. Now let's go to the second stanza. The last word in the first line is way. The last word in the second line is pleasure. Then we have stay, way, stay, that's A and A in the first and the third line. Then pleasure and treasure, that is B and B. And then we have lay, rhyming with way and stay. So that is A, B, and A yet again. Let's go to the third stanza. The last word in the first stanza is he. Then we have the last word in the second line is creature. Then we have me, rhyming with he, that is A and A, creature is B. Then we have a word that rhymes with it in the last line yet again is nature, creature, nature, the rhyme. And then we have B, rhyming with me and he. So that is another rhyme scheme, A, B, A. In the last stanza, we see rest as the last word in the first line. Then we see the last word in the second line, restlessness. Rest is A. Restlessness doesn't rhyme with rest, so that is B. Then we have list. It rhymes with A, and then that is the next one is weariness. Restlessness, weariness, that's B. And then the last one is breast, which rhymes with rest and list. So we also see A, B, A. So the rhyme scheme in every stanza of the poem The Pulley by George Herbert is A, B, A. Now, those are the major things, if not all, of which you have to understand about these two major non-African poems. When we meet again, we'll always explore other poems in this category and beyond. Thank you very much for watching, and look out for our next episode. Thanks.